evening. Our top story this week. In North Carolina, two foster parents, one of which was a CPS agent, was arrested after the kid in their care was found handcuffed by his ankles to a porch with a dead chicken tied around his neck. In New York, lawmakers are holding hearings on what to do about all the CPS failures in Erie County. In Illinois, lawmakers are upset over the rising number of CPS fuck-ups in the state. Virginia, as it turns out, is number one in the country for the number of kids aging out of foster care without permanent homes. In Georgia, two CPS supervisors who are overseeing the cases of two kids who died are fired, while Georgia's governor makes a $27 million deal to hire hundreds more CPS agents. In Florida, the child protective industry wants more money to fix their failures after a number of kids have died while under the watchful eye of CPS agents. Although at least one Florida judge realizes that humans are by nature subject to error, and therefore there will always be CPS failures because CPS agents aren't perfect enough to not screw up occasionally. In Maine, the Wabanaki Indian tribe is set to begin collecting people's accounts of how the child protective industry snatched them and their kids from loving homes and bounced them around an abusive foster care system. In Washington, D.C., South Dakota's tribal leaders are going off over a long-running dispute against the high number of stolen Native American kids in that state, and the state of Nebraska is seeing a rising disparity in the number of stolen Indian kids, as 1 in 10 foster kids in the state is Native American, up from 1 in 14 a year ago. In Nevada, Las Vegas CPS is defending themselves against complaints against the child abuse hotline, which isn't living up to its hype. A new study says that most kids who are offered the opportunity to stay in foster care beyond the age of 18 choose to get out. Virginia, as it turns out, is number one in the country for the number of kids aging out of foster care without permanent homes. And in Rhode Island, an expert claims that the state is among the worst in the country at protecting children from abuse or neglect. In Michigan, a group is calling for a total reform of the child welfare laws in order to get CPS agents to stop snatching the kids of medical marijuana users. In Arkansas, the family courts are spying on parents' social media use, where Facebook is now showing up in 1 out of 3 child custody cases. In California, the Los Angeles child protective industry has to pay a $600 fine for delays in placing kids in foster homes. And in Kansas, advocates for the needy are pissed because they just found out that the child protective industry has been withholding $48 million without telling them. In South Africa, 28 kids are taken from an orphanage after being poisoned, and 5 foster kids have died over the last year in Ireland. In Canada, the number of kids who have been stolen by social workers in Manitoba has almost doubled since 1999. And in British Columbia, the child protective industry and their system sucks are eating up $500 million a year. In Australia, the child protective industry wants to make adopting kids easier, which is causing fears of another generation of kids being stolen from their parents. An Australian foster father admits to sexually abusing his foster daughter, and Indigenous children in the Northern Territories are 6 times more likely to be taken into foster care than are their non-Indigenous peers. In England, a mother is fighting for her son after a judge orders adoption, even when the social workers said she was taking good care of him. A mistaken medical report almost leads to another mother losing her kids when it falsely accused her of drinking. A British social worker was suspended for 12 months after failing to report a sexual abuse case, and the British Education Secretary is promising changes after coming to the realization that social workers aren't cut out for the job. A British charity warns that putting kids into foster care puts them at risk of exploitation. An inexperienced British social worker can keep working even though she failed to report a kid who claimed to be abused. And a bill that's going through the British Parliament seeks to criminalize British kids who are an annoyance to others. In entertainment news this week, the Chinese are pissed at talk show host Jimmy Kimmel after he aired a roundtable discussion with kids where one suggested killing everybody in China as a way to deal with the $1 trillion American debt. And the child protective industry fires back against Charlie Sheen's recent Twitter rant, saying that he cares more about drugs and porn than his kids. In Alabama, a foster parent is charged with sexually abusing 2 girls in his care. In Arizona, a foster parent pleads not guilty to injuring a 1-year-old for throwing her sippy cup. In Indiana, a mother is saying that it's about the best interest of the child and not about gay rights as to why she's trying to keep her former lesbian lover out of the kid's life. And a group of New York City parents are planning to sue to stop the schools from sharing their kids' private data with private companies. In Ohio, a couple of adoptive parents are facing criminal charges for giving the kid back to the child protective industry. In Oregon, a CPS agent is fired for going on a Facebook rant against welfare recipients who she was investigating. In Texas, the child protective industry apologizes to a non-custodial father after the kid was killed by the custodial mother. 3 kids who were rescued from a Texas sex ring were allegedly abused while in foster care. And finally, tonight, the anti-abuse idiots are upset after a mommy blogger takes on over protective parents by suggesting that bullied kids should, quote, toughen up, end quote. For these stories and all the latest dirt on the child protective industry, visit www.legallykidnapped.com. And until next week, this is Baby LK, over and out.